going to regret this.
Welcome to the Nerd Party.
Hi, this is Nick Anastasiou, story editor on Star Wars The Clone Wars and Star Wars Bad Batch. And you are listening to Aggressive Negotiations.
Well, hello and welcome to Aggressive Negotiations, that Star Wars podcast coming at you from, I'm not really sure what planet it is, but we'll just say it's just another seedy bar, another wretched hive of scum and villainy, and with me, as he is always, whose middle names are Scum and Villainy, Jedi Master John Mills.
But I'm no longer wretched ever since I took that shower. So
that's
a
so
plus.
true. Oh, thank God.
That's a big plus.
Yeah.
But scum and villainy is really where we find the adventures, isn't it?
It's true. It's true. Was it weird, though, that Chewie also, decided it was the right time to take a shower at that moment?
Well, that's the thing, is Wookiees surprisingly need to shower all the time. Otherwise, they truly bring the wretched everywhere. And honestly,
I mean, can you have that feathered look with the hair if you don't, shower regularly with that much hair?
Well, the thing is, they cover the showering in Solo: A Star Wars Story, but they never cover the drying. Does Chewie shake like a dog at the end of a shower?
He just walked out into the cockpit area and just shook over everyone.
Right. Or is it a blow dryer situation? Right.
When you go through a car wash and they have those massive blow dryers, that's what Wookiees need, right?
I feel like that. Otherwise, when they walked out and they were, going over that landscape, I feel like ice crystals should have been forming on Chewie.
It's very true. It's very true. But before we keep going down this road, because that's not what we're here to talk about, we're going to be talking about the Bad Batch episode from season 2, number 12, The Outpost, which is anything but funny. So before we do that, want to remind you can find us wherever you get your podcasts. Please do subscribe, share the podcast with your friends, give us star ratings and reviews on Apple Podcasts, let people know you're listening. You can also, of course, follow us over on whatever they call Twitter or X or something like that. I guess X marks the spot. So mark your spot with us at the Jedi Masters. We've got the entire network at Join Nerd Party. You can also find us at Facebook at facebook.com/The Nerd Party. And we're online at thenerdparty.com. Okay. So, John, we mentioned that this episode is anything but funny. And because this is the major turning point in the life of Crosshair. And I guess this episode really is difficult to talk about, I think, without just talking about him as a character and the arc that he is forced to go through here. And I figured, why beat around the bush about it? We should just talk about it.
Oh, for sure. Crosshair's journey is obviously at the core of showing exactly how the Empire has changed the galaxy. We're seeing it in all of these different ways. But Crosshair becomes our way of illustrating nothing from the old order can remain. It would be enough to say, oh, well, we've got an army. Let's just keep doing what worked. But you can't do that because that army is dedicated to the old order. And Crosshair is good soldiers follow orders. And then he's just given an increasing level of orders that are impossible to follow for a person with a conscience. And as much as we might not like what Crosshair has chosen, he chose it because he was misguided. He thought that he could remain the soldier that he always was. But the problem is always going to be is who's in command. And we see repeatedly, and of course, it just comes to a head here, of the quality of commander is what has changed. What's interesting is this commander here and the commanders, and Rampart as well, that we run across with Crosshair. What I was really thinking about when I was watching it this time is there's one shot where the lieutenant and Crosshair enter that base, and it's reminiscent of Tarkin walking in with Vader behind him. And what I was thinking in that instant moment was Tarkin winds up being a successful commander with Vader because they're both from the old school. And so why does Vader get along with Tarkin, whereas he doesn't get along with Mahdi or Tag or anything like that, is because they're both from the old school And all of the other people in Star Wars around that table are part of the New Order, the new command. They don't show Vader the appropriate amount of respect the same way that this new commander doesn't show a war veteran. Let's be honest. Crosshair's a war veteran. It buys him no respect. These clones get no respect. And then additionally, and I know I'm rambling at this point, but I want to bring it to this point in specific. There was something that the first couple of times I've watched this episode, because it is a masterpiece. I adore this episode. It's so magnificent. But man, when that lieutenant uses the word clone, the way he says it sounds like a racial slur.
Oh, yeah.
And it really, really emphasizes that change in mindset that we're in. Am I reading too much into it, or do you also get that echo?
No, 100%. I think you're absolutely right. And that is actually the thing that stuck out to me again in this rewatch was the fact that what we see here is the clones being treated as second-class citizens, in the very same way, like you said, that people would use a racial slur to devalue another human being. And I was thinking about this. What we have here is the difference in the way in which the Empire is going to build its army in the way that the Republic did. And the Republic, not necessarily intentionally, but what they did was they had bought, because they're clones, a band of brothers, a band of beings who care very much about one another because they are all related, right? They are legitimately, in this weird way, family. And then, of course, being under the tutelage of the Jedi, it just reinforces that idea. Not only are they family, but they are also beings that deserve respect and honor and should have minds of their own. They should be able to have names and all these things. And so you put all that together, and it's quite understandable as to why then Palpatine would want to create the Imperial Stormtrooper, which brings people together from disparate elements of the galaxy. They have nothing in common other than the Empire. And so therefore their only allegiance then, if they have any allegiance, is to the Empire. And then of course you've got all of these people in command who are encouraged basically to do whatever it takes to get to the top. And so they don't care about anybody underneath them as long as it gets them where they want to go. And you put all that together and you can just really see the difference between, even though the Republic was falling, it still had these great ideals, right? Of course, led by the Jedi and even by their clone army. And how this series has completely dismantled all of those things. And so therefore, it, in many ways, what Palpatine is doing is he's doing the same thing that, you always hate to use them as an example, but the Nazis with the year zero, right? To completely restart, to get rid of all the old and bring in the new as if the old never existed. And that's exactly what Palpatine is doing here with the army. And you then see this, like you said, Crosshair here thought he could trust this army. He thought he could trust this Empire to take care of him the way that the Republic had done. And he becomes the collateral damage of realizing that's not the case.
And there's, Mao, Stalin, everybody, history didn't, start until we got here, and the past is erased. You're absolutely right. Like it's the hallmark of dictators that, they are the genesis of the life that's necessary, sort of thing. But I think that in addition to that, what is always going to be fascinating is you have this system where we're seeing it dismantled in front of our eyes, but you also see this direct impact, not just on Crosshair, not just on the Batch, but we get to know Mayday in this episode. And I want an action figure of Mayday very badly. I love spins on armor. in case anybody hasn't listened long enough to know, I have sort of an armor fetish. And it's probably a misuse of the word, but like I love good armor. And all of it's just like when I saw Thrawn's army in Ahsoka, where I was like, "Ooh, that's interesting. I like that a lot." It's like the first time I saw the shock troopers in Revenge of the Sith. I was like, "That's the paint design. That's the one that I like most." But Mayday as a character, it's interesting to me because Mayday lands points with Crosshair that Cody was trying to make with him.
Yes.
But Crosshair wasn't listening. Why is that? Is it because he knew Cody? Is it because Cody represented the Batch, where he's like, oh, I've known them for so long. This is just an extension of the same fight we've always had. Whereas encountering Mayday, he realized, oh, maybe my brothers had a point. Mm-hmm. Do you think it's that?
It's possible because I was also thinking about Mayday says to the Imperial commander, he says, in my experience means more than status. It's the same thing that Rex said to Ahsoka in the movie, the Clone Wars movie. Mm-hmm. It's the same thing. And I love that callback because that's exactly here what the clones have. They have all of this experience, as you mentioned earlier. They are war heroes. They have saved, the galaxy, and now they are being discarded like, the 2-bit, green army trooper that the Emperor is treating them like. And I think that's the terrifying thing too, because what I see in this episode is the way in which, we talked about the way the commander, uses the word clone as some sort of slur. And I think it's incredibly important and salient for us to remember that the easiest way to get rid of people you don't like is to, in people's minds, change how you think about them by being able to look at them differently by using language that devalues them. And we have seen that, of course, throughout history. And sadly, it seems to be something that we continue to do. And I love that this show is pointing that out here with the way that the Empire is, and of course, we just saw the episode a few episodes back where the Emperor basically blames the clones for what have happened and says, oh, well, it's their fault for just following orders too well. So it's time for the Imperial Stormtrooper, so they have gotten the short end of the stick every which way.
Well, it's additionally, because you have that scene in here where Crosshair sees the clones walking by being retired, and they're saying that, what am I supposed to do? That's not my problem. And it is interesting, and you'd mentioned this earlier, where the Jedi take clones who only know themselves by designation numbers and teach them to have names and individuality. And the Empire takes people with names and individuality and only refers to them as numbers.
Yeah.
TK421, why aren't you at your post? We see that step to get there. But one thing I wanted to touch on specifically was the vulture-like super creature that's flying up in the sky, flying by.
It's great.
Did you get hints of sort of a dark echo of the owl from Mortis / something evocative? This time I was watching it, I got something evocative of the sun from Mortis, a similar motif. The dark side is here. This is an evil thing, an evil place, and an evil moment. And because Crosshair sees it fly by before he makes his fateful decision, like it flies by when he has that realization of there's only one way to deal with this lieutenant, even though he knows what it's going to get him in the end.
Yeah, I mean, I do think in some ways that this is kind of supposed to be evocative of the owl in the sense, especially with, and I think that in Native American terms, where the owl represents death, and so I think you're right on there, because in some ways this is the death of the old Crosshair.
Mm-hmm.
And the rest of the series is slowly going to be about the rebirth of the new Crosshair, the reborn Crosshair. And so I really like that idea. And I think that's exactly kind of what they're going for, with this creature flying in the sky. And two, I mean, it's basically, it almost seems like an ice vulture, right? And so I think it fits very well with all of those motifs. And so, yeah, it's great, honestly. I think it really adds to the utter melancholy nature of, especially, I think, the end of the episode, and I love that. I really like the way in which I think they're just playing with all of this stuff, and they're clearly creating something that, I mean, this is just one of the most cinematic episodes they've done. We've talked so much in this rewatch about the way in which so much has grown with the visuals. But I mean, that pullback of the avalanche coming down, and then it's just that gorgeous mountain range.
Oh,
that looks
absolutely beautiful,
terrifying because of what it is. The work here is really, really astounding.
Well, and the lighting too is very much, on display again. It's very evocative of the type of lighting Lucas was going for and preferred. And I think that so much of it is just a really, it's an optimization, a maximalization of everything available to them as a tool.
Yeah.
It's something that is extraordinarily special that they accomplish here. And the thing is, it's, to get to your point, like, this is a short film. This is not just an episode of television. This is a bottle episode, if you will, but it's one that is to your point, a pivotal moment. So it's key to everything that came before and comes after. But this is one of those magical episodes where I feel like I could just sit somebody down and say,
right,
maybe you won't love it as much as I do because it doesn't impact you the same way, but you can at least sit down and watch this beginning to finish and feel like you went on a full journey here with this character. Everything you need conveyed to you happens here. If you've never met Crosshair before, it's all you need to know. And I think that ties into, it's a very bold decision, I think, not to have what other series or movies or whatever would feel the compulsion to have, which would be, it doesn't keep going further with anything additional to show what's going on with the rest of the batch at this time, or to show somebody having a strange feeling about something. Like, it ends where it's supposed to end.
Yeah.
And it ends in such a way where you're still like, whoa, wait, what does this mean? And it's going to just sit there and say, nope, you got to sit there. And something else I enjoy is when they have an episode like this, is they don't kick into the theme song on the end credits the way they usually do. The music's always a little bit different. And this time it's somber coming into the end credits. And it's like, wow, that was something special. That was something different.
Yeah, I always love when they do that with the episodes that are much more intense, that they don't then hit the regular Bad Batch music. They let you sit basically in that intensity by continuing that very moody, Hans Zimmer-like sound that has come to mean so much in this series, which is the evisceration of joy, you know, like, and I think it really, really works. It's the same thing, you know, and I think that they've then continued then with the way they played around with the music in the Andor series, which I thought was great as well in that sense, where you're slowly kind of getting, by the end of that series, to something that feels more like classical Star Wars-y with horned instruments and everything. So yeah, I think this is one of those episodes that I think just stands out from the rest. And it's not because the rest aren't good. It's just because this is so good. I think you said it best in that it feels like a short film, and it also feels like the type of episode that George talked about with his movies, where that if you didn't have any dialogue, this episode would still make sense. And it's because I think the visuals are so striking and so evocative of the emotions that are going on within the characters. You know, that is an incredible feat for an animated show to be able to pull off.
Well, I mean, we're seeing something that elevates the art form, or at least people's perception of the art form. We're seeing something where it doesn't say, oh, we're quote unquote just animation. We're seeing something that says this is just a medium used to tell. They could cast this live. These stories are every bit as well written and edited as anything you'll see live action. If not better than half the stuff I see, if not more than half the stuff I see. And that's the thing, is a lot of people come into animation with a bias, but also a lot of people who work in animation accept the bias. They allow it to infect the way they approach their own work, whereas there's no sense of that at all with The Bad Batch. This is simply storytelling, and it happens to be animated, period. That's it. And I think that, we continue to heap praise on the show. And so I know that maybe it falls deaf on some ears, but this episode in specific is so incredible as to leave me speechless, honestly, because I am, even knowing where we're going from here, even knowing everything else that happens, even knowing everything that's come before, this is still an episode that stops me in my tracks. This will forever be in my top 3 list of Bad Batch episodes. I don't see it ever getting kicked out, simply because it's so perfectly contained and told. And it takes a character that normally we would be conditioned to feel no sympathy for, to be encouraged to feel no empathy for, and instead says, you really dislike what this guy did, but he's still a person. And you have to give everybody the opportunity to see the error of their ways. As painful as it might be, you have to be willing to say, oh, wow, Crosshair understands now. Crosshair gets it. And then the slick thing of making him then a bridge to Tantus. And that's going to become so important to where we're going from here.
Yeah, I mean, there's not really anything I can add to that. It's just a fantastic episode. And it reminds me of when we were doing Assembling Avengers, and you know, the top movie was always going to be Winter Soldier. Like, what was going to take its place? Probably nothing. And so, and I'm like that with this episode here. You know, 100%. This is an episode that clearly and utterly belongs and always will belong. And you know, like you said, most likely top 3 of the series. You know, I don't know how it could get better than this in many ways. And yet, as we move into the end of season 2 now, and then we'll hit season 3 as well. Oh my gosh, the show is just, it's crazy to think, but it's getting better and better, man.
It is, and it's obviously at this point in season 2 ramping up for something big coming our way. And speaking of big things coming our way, people can get excited for how they can interact with you online. And so where can people find you if they want to continue discussing the Outpost from season 2 of The Bad Batch?
Yeah. You, of course, you could find me all over social media under the name MattRushing02. You can also find me here on the network with another show called Outpost with Dre Kaufman, talking about every single chapter of the Harry Potter series, one chapter at a time. Over on the TFM network, you'll find me doing the 602 Club, talking about all of the franchises we love outside of Star Trek. You'll also find me doing Warp 5, The Orb, The Artificial Tango, Saddle Up, and sometimes on Literary Treks. But John, if people wanted to catch up with you, see all that is going on in Castlevania, where would they find you?
Well, you can find Castlevania's latest press releases under my name, Kessel Junkie, out there on whatever social network you want to choose. Good luck finding me because nobody follows my feeds, and that's good. It's probably better for everybody in that case. You can also find me here on the network co-hosting a show called House Lights, where we look at the films of different directors, which I discovered as of the recording of this episode that a friend of mine follows on Amazon Music. And I said, hey, that's a show that I'm on, along with Aggressive Negotiations. And he said, you're on this one? I said, you didn't notice I said my name on every episode? He said, no. I said, well, great. I'm glad that you're enjoying everything. So please, everybody, enjoy, as we will enjoy, going back and decompressing at the Jedi Temple to process all of the emotions that the Outpost left with us. So, Master Rushing, I guess it's time to close these negotiations.
John, negotiations are closed.
Join the revolution. Join the Nerd Party.